coming live from Old Keig, a group favourite. It's a beautiful 15 degrees May Saturday, blue sky, the sun is shining, it's almost too hot. So when I got here I had a little bit of an explore. I noticed that there was a pathway, there's a track here connecting the two fields. This strip of land with trees on it goes all the way down here, and there's a path down here. 300 metres down at the bottom of this there is a massive square block of a stone, probably 3 metres by 2 by 2, with a big chunk out it. It's clearly been moved, it's got lots of score marks on it, and it is square enough to be a recumbent in my view. And about 10 metres up the hill there's a large boulder field of stones that have been broken up deliberately, which again could be circle stones, flankers. There's a potential previous ruined circle at the bottom of here, I believe. But anyway, we're here to talk about Old Keig, and so let's have a look at this. This is one of the largest recumbents, or the largest recumbent stone of recumbent stone circles we have. And it's massive. It's a massive recumbent setting. This recumbent itself, I know we're going to maybe talk about the stones individually, but it's a 5 metre long or 5.5 metre long stone, either really well finished off from some quarrying and some dressing, or has been deliberately found as a fairly square stone. It's relatively flat on top, and the sides are flat and the ends flat, apart from this one that's broken at the end. But it's a lovely setting. It's reasonably accessible. B Road comes up at the top of this strip of land here. There's parking, there's a lay-by at the top, and a lovely little path down here. Really accessible, nice and easy to get to. And on a day like this, it's just, I wish I'd brought a picnic with me, to be honest. So let's start off in our usual way. So what we've got here is we've got the recumbent setting, so stones 1, 2 and 3 all still standing. We have a circle stone number 4 still standing at the edge, and what was identified as stone 5 across there, 6 and 7, which have all fallen. There's also quite a lot of evidence of the cairn curbstones, and there was a record of a central court. However, that's now been completely buried or destroyed or taken away or whatever. But I might have a look around some of the other stones round about the dikes as well, because there was thoughts that these might be curbstones as well. So let's have a quick look here then. So stone number 1, or the west flanker, I think it's this one's maybe kind of 2.2 metres high, which is about kind of right when I kind of stand up close by it. It's got a little bit of a kind of, this is kind of, I'm on the outside of the circle here, it's got a little bit of a kind of triangular point coming in. It's not square, but it's kind of triangular, unless there's been a whole chunk being missed off here. I mean, you could maybe kind of suggest that this edge is nice and flat, and this one's a bit more kind of rough. It could be a whole section of stones being missed here, or being broken off. Again, there's there's some evidence of some right angles there, and maybe the top's been knocked off a little bit as well. So a block of a stone, without a doubt, perhaps originally was maybe bigger. But yeah, a lovely example of a flanker, that one. And then there's the recumbent. Geez, what can you say about the recumbent? I mean, I'm trying to get an on top section there. It's huge. Look how wide that is. I mean, I think it's a couple of metres, maybe a little bit more wide. Relatively flat at the top. This is the outward facing face of the recumbent. If I stand up kind of close to it, I think it's 1.7 metres high, which would be about right. I'm 1.65, so it's just about my head level. And again, relatively, if I try to kind of get a side view, relatively flattish. Here's the corner end, and you can see the width, the depth. You know, this is a monster. This is a significant stone, this one. And just to kind of get the other end, which is either broken off or been deliberately shaped like this, or was found like this, but there's a little cave underneath now. You'd make you maybe wonder how a section would have been broken off, but it is what it is. Let's have a look at the inside face. And this is really quite a rugged section. You'd be forgiven to see this stepped section here has maybe had a bit of damage. Now, if you say, well, that's been damaged, it might kind of fall into line that section at the end's had a bit of a knock as well. If this is the original face, let's have a look along it from the end. Again, a bit the same as the other side, not smooth, but I mean it's relatively flat. And then you get to the step about a third away from this end. It's been stepped in. That is elbow to fingertip deep. You know, that's quite a deep gouge in the stone, which then corresponds with this end. So you could build a picture that's just the stones as they were found, and that's the way they are. Or this flanker's taken a smack because it's rough on this side. This whole section's been knocked away. That's been knocked away. This section here has been knocked off. There could have been a fair bit of damage. I couldn't see old Keig as a recumbent ever being moved from when it was laid down. It reportedly around about 50 tons worth of stone of granite. How you would possibly move that from once it was placed, I don't know, but it has potentially been damaged, and I'll come into why that's damaged. I suspect it's trees, like a lot of our stone circles have suffered from. There's been plantations here from as long as anybody can remember, and probably trees grown here for thousands of years. So, you know, storms, fallen trees deliberately felled, smacking them, hitting them, you could potentially see a bit of damage coming along. So yeah, it is one of these stones that if you can visit Old Keig and come and see it, it's definitely worth standing beside it, because it's just one of these kind of wonders that you think how some recumbents you say, oh, it wouldn't take, you know, many people pulling a sledge up a hill to move that kind of recumbent, but this is just a different story altogether. Anyway, enough bleating about the recumbent, and on to stone 3, the east flanker. Now, quite slender, a wee bit taller than the first one. A bit of a slab of a stone. I'm trying to work on my vocabulary about describing these, but it is again, it's a significant monster of a thing when you're standing beside it. I'm not particularly tall, but I think it's 2.4 metres high, this one. And you can kind of see the kind of, if I stand back against the fence, the kind of width of it compared to, you know, the 5.5 metres of the recumbent. This is a pretty wide stone, just to get some perspective. Kind of shoulder to fingertip, about halfway along, so maybe 2 arms length for a short person for stone number 3. And it's a lovely recumbent setting, and it gives you the impression of a large recumbent setting kind of corresponds to a large circle. So what the early surveyors have kind of recorded is that the circle would have come round stone 4, slightly going outside the fence perimeter there, coming back in with kind of like stone 5 had maybe been dropped in towards the circle, round to 6, 7, and probably going outside the circle, the fence diameter, the fence perimeter there, and coming back in. There's also the curbstones giving a slightly smaller circle within the circle, within the monument here as well. However, it's quite clear that a lot of the curbstones identified have been used for the stone dikes. So let's look at stone 4, 5, 6 and 7, and I'll come back and look at the curb stones. So stone 4 is a lovely stone. Again, it's fairly flat faced, although it's got a kind of curved edge here. And again, the same kind of thing, fairly smooth sides, and then this side's pretty rough. So it could be, and it's like not well finished off, or it's not been well, you know, compared to the other sides of it. And again, this kind of corner here, there could have been a fair bit of damage, a whole corner section knocked off here, a whole maybe slither of the stones being knocked off at this side. It just gives the impression of smooth sides on two sides and then pretty rough sides on the other. Would maybe suggest some kind of damage, but it is, I think this one's about the same as the number 3 stone in height, maybe just a little bit taller, 2.5 maybe meters. So that's number 4. And coming round and past this pretty well established tree, there's a stone here called, in a lot of the Great Crowns of Stone plan, called stone A, and that has been identified or categorised as a curb stone, just as these two have been as well. Just going to have a quick look at them. Pretty chunky for curb stones, I must admit, but I suppose if you had buried one maybe by about a third and it was on its, you know, long side across, just coming up to hold the cairn up, the cairn stones from falling back, I suspect that may be what they are. This one, on the other hand, is probably chunky enough to have maybe been a circle stone at one point, but let's go by the categories that had been assigned. So a couple of curb stones. So stone number 5 is over here by the fence line. Or been identified as stone number 5 anyway. Kind of hard to tell. It's you know, it's a fairly medium to small kind of stone for a circle stone, but if it's been damaged or smacked by a tree and broken up, there's evidence of broken stones here. Could well have been, but it's been identified as stone number 5 next to the boundary. And again, this kind of falls slightly in line with the recumbent setting. Stone number 4, the circle would come just outside, maybe a metre outside this fence line. So stone 5 could have easily been this one and fallen inwards. So stone number 6, there is a little bit of a banking round about here with these stones, but if we follow this along, we'll find, hopefully, here it is, stone number 6, and buried. So there's no way of knowing. In the sketches it's kind of shown as a bit of a kind of triangled shape, but unless you kind of start to excavate it, there's no way of knowing. So that's stone 6, and then stone 7 is a far more traditional kind of what you might see as a circle stone, right angles, rectangular in shape. Stone number 7. Now there is a couple of oddities. There's a fairly, I'm standing at stone 7, there's stone 6, there's a large boulder there. It could have been part of the circle stones, and then just behind stone 7 there's a large boulder there, which again could have been a circle stone. It's huge. And then you start just from stone 7, so if I just walk up the path from stone 7, just come up here, you can see there's this change in level. There's a couple of stones here, and there's a circle curve all the way around to where stone 5 is. And again, this was kind of seen as maybe where the curb stones would have lied, and the cairn would have been in the centre here, central court in the middle. So a few stones identified as maybe being curb stones, but they're not the classic kind of slab thin long stones that you'd maybe expect to see as a kind of curb stone, literally like a curb to hold stones in. They're more like kind of shattered remains of a stone, probably maybe that one. But walk round the circle then, and there's been a few of these stones identified as being curbstones are up here at the fence line. Up here, 3 being identified, 1, 2, 3, and then these 3, 4 being kind of identified as kind of curbstones coming back in to meet the recumbent section. And that would, I think the overall guess of the diameter of the circle stones was about 27 metres, which is quite big, which would probably go in line with the proportions of the recumbent. But the diameter of the curbstones, I think, is around about maybe 24, 23 metres in width. So a pretty big cairn, without a doubt. And again, no surprise it's no longer exists, because cairn stones are just ideal for building stone dikes. So again, concentrating on the curbstones, we've seen these two. Again, yeah, there's a pretty good chance that they maybe were. But there was a guess that some of the, if we go to the outer fence, just beyond this large tree, there's some, if I lean over the fence, there's some evidence of these range of flat stones that make up the outer wall of this boundary field are curbstones also. There's the excavations that took place here were pretty extensive, and there's some controversy around, well, no controversy, but there's some discussion around about the earthenware that was found being potentially, found, at late Bronze Age, being found maybe under the recumbent. Some maybe being found round about underneath the cairn, and kind of thoughts round about that. Well, what does that mean about the age of this stone? And I'll give you an example of what I was kind of thinking about. The 200 years ago, the sketches that were done by the early surveyors had only recognised the recumbent, a couple of curbstones, and stone 4. They hadn't found 5, 6, and 7. They were buried under gorse bush, and it was a heavy plantation here of trees. And a bit like White Hills, the surveyors suffered there from being able to identify the whole circle because of the denseness of the trees. And it was only 100 years ago that stones 5, 6, and 7 were identified. Now, why I think you can be forgiven for Bronze Age earthware being found deeper than it maybe should be is the trees. If this has been a plantation for at least 300 years, it's probably been trees growing on it for 5,000 years. And you got kind of things like this, so you've got a tree that grows over sort of 40, 50 years, topples over and moves gradually a stone, or uproots a stone, or pops a stone out that's been standing for hundreds of years, pops it out like a tooth. So like stone 7 here has got 2 trees growing beside it, and we all know that the root infrastructure underneath here is extensive. And a good gust of wind, and if that tree fell, or both trees fell, the roots would pull this stone out of its location. So if you think about maybe a tree being kind of 40, 50, 60 years old in its generation, maybe being felled or fallen, you could probably understand why a lot of circle stones at least have been uprooted, or maybe not in the same location as maybe kind of they should be. Then there's the tree actually falling or being felled. Could go to some way of explaining why a lot of the stones, generally in stone circles, and especially here, have been, broken. So, storms like we had here a couple of years ago, if you had a heavy tree plantation round about here, and you had a lot of trees getting blown down in the storm, they would just smack these stones, and damage them quite badly. So I think there's a potential explanation using trees as a bit of a kind of like a a suspect for finding earthenware. And what I mean by that is, root networks growing and then rotting as the tree dies, leaving a gap, and the topsoil maybe holding some earthware falling down, and then years and years and years of that, like a slow, really slow cultivation of the ground by the tree roots, growing and dying, growing and dying, growing and dying over thousands of years, could explain why during the excavations they found pottery fragments further down and maybe underneath a couple of the stones where they found the location. So that might be an explanation. And certainly I'm no expert, so I could just be speaking nonsense. But yeah, I think there's potentially, if you ever come here, it's worth a little walk down that lane to see that block stone. It could be a potential recumbent, but definitely worth a visit to Old Keig. Hopefully that little walk through has been useful on this fine day. And I think I've probably blethered enough. So again, thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you later.